Have you ever heard of a hot cocoa that promises a better night's rest? I know over the past few years, including this year, 2025, I have seen ads from a company called Beam. And Beam makes something called the Dream Powder. Their promise? A better night's sleep and a refreshed morning, all thanks to this like magic hot chocolate. But they're not just selling like cozy vibes, they have the receipts. They have a clinical study. Gosh, that sounds scientific. According to their ads, 93% of participants reported that Dream helped them to get a more restful night's sleep and wake up feeling refreshed. Sounds magical, right? Add to cart. But you know me. I couldn't just let the claim sit. I've seen it too many times, this magical 93%, this hot cocoa that's going to make me sleep better at night. I had to dig into it. Clinical study does sound legit, right? It adds this like shiny scientific credibility to their promise. But here's the real question. Is this just a case of fancy lingo hiding something much less impressive? Is this good marketing or is this science? Maybe it's a little bit of both. Let's find out. So Beam actually dedicates like an entire section on their website to this clinical study. And their wording is truly, in my opinion, designed to just like wow you with science. Here is a direct quote. Dream is clinically shown to improve your sleep and your wellness the next day. That's the headline. That's the quote. It's clinically shown, y'all. Science says this magic hot chocolate works. They then go on to say they used a third-party clinical research organization, and they describe their research as the gold standard of clinical studies. Y'all, they're throwing out those words designed to make you ooh and ah. Isn't that interesting? So impressive. We've got randomized, double blind, placebo controlled. It's every scientist's dream, right? If you're not familiar with those terms, no worries. They have you covered with this little tasty direct quote. Translation, that's in the direct quote, just to be clear, I'm not being funny. Translation, we took every possible measure to ensure our results were unbiased and accurate. This is a bold claim, y'all. Bold claim. Let's take a minute and break down these terms, okay? So first we have third party. Here's what that means. That means Beam didn't go do the research themselves, which like, yay, that's great. If you are selling a product and you're doing your own research on the product, that's okay, right? Because you're like testing it to see if it works, whatever. But it's not as credible because people are like, obviously, you want your product to be doing well. So your research could be biased by the fact that like you want to see it do well. So you do third party research. And like I'll say this, oftentimes like I am a third party researcher. That is like one of my job titles in life, third party researcher. And the idea is like I don't work for your organization. I don't care if this thing works or not. Let's just figure it out, right? Third party research is more trusted, is more credible. So like great, they're doing third party research. Beam engaged in their third party research with Citrus Labs. Now, Citrus Labs is a study that says, how many times am I going to direct quote on this episode? I don't know, but I'm a lot, it seems. I just like you to know when it's what a company is actually putting out there. So Citrus Labs says their goal is to, direct quote, substantiate product claims, enhance credibility, and drive business growth. Now, as a researcher, I can tell you those do not sound like research org's goals to me. Those sound like marketing goals. Research is about discovering the truth, discovering evidence. It's not about guaranteeing good results. And obviously, they're not saying, like, hey, we promise we're going to get you really good results. No, they're not saying that, but just the way that they're like, hey, we're going to substantiate product claims. To me, I think it's more like maybe we'll substantiate your product claims. We don't know because we haven't done the research yet. So, them saying we're going to substantiate product claims, we're going to enhance your credibility, and we're going to drive business growth sounds like they're getting some really good research. And how could they possibly guarantee that? Like with research, you don't know. So, like, I'm honestly not a Citrus Labs fan at this moment. Like, it just seems suspect for me. Like, is this a marketing company or a research company? Let's get real. Clinical study. Kind of an overused term, but technically what it means is people are doing research to test how well a medical approach, in this case like a sleep aid, works in people. Gold standard. Now, this is a little controversial because not everyone agrees on what the gold standard in research is, but stereotypically, traditionally, what the gold standard in research is a randomized control trial. And it's considered the gold standard because it is, in many people's opinions, the best way to determine cause and effect. So if you want to know if something like your magical hot chocolate is causing people to sleep better, the gold standard would be to do a randomized control trial. They are defining their study as a gold standard. So honestly, like I'm expecting to them go on and describe to me a randomized control trial. Do they? Wait and find out. Randomized. Weird already that they're saying this because they just said gold standard, which I'm like, that implies randomized, but okay. For randomized, you always want to think like pulling names out of a hat, right? Like you got two groups, you could have more than two groups, but for simplicity, let's say you got two groups. You have two groups, you're pulling names out of a hat, and like one goes over here, and one goes over here, and one goes over here, and one goes over here. And that's how you're creating the groups. You're randomizing people to these two different groups. And technically, in a randomized control trial, then one group would get like nothing or a placebo, and one group would get the thing you want to test to see if it works. Double blind. So, double blind is this idea that basically, like, nobody doing the research or participating in the research actually knows who is getting the placebo versus who is getting the treatment, in this case, like the magic hot chocolate. So, normally in a study, you wouldn't know if you are getting the treatment or a placebo. So, it would be like single blind, right? Like, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that, but that's the idea, right? Like, I don't know, am I getting the magic hot chocolate or not? I don't know. But oftentimes the researchers might actually know. And in this case, they're saying, hey, we're doing a great job. It's double blind. The researchers don't know who's getting the placebo versus the magic hot chocolate, and neither do the people. And the point here is just to like reduce the possibility that someone is like manipulating the results or treating things differently because they know who's getting the thing and who's not getting the thing. Placebo controlled. This is like a great design to use when you're doing some sort of like medical intervention that involves like eating or drinking something or like doing a type of activity, because when you design a study and you're comparing groups and experiences between people to see if your thing works or not, you really want to hold like everything constant except for the thing you're wondering if it works. So in this case, placebo control means like everyone is drinking a hot chocolate at night before bed. Everyone. But some of the people have the placebo hot chocolate, so it's just like normal hot chocolate. And some of the people have the magic hot chocolate. I say magic, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know their secret sauce. And I'm going to say, you all, like, to come straight out of the gate and be like, we're doing the gold standard. It's a third party clinical study. It's randomized. It's double blind. It's placebo controlled. It sounds redundant to me, but I'm like, yeah, like, impressive. I bet people are like seeing this and thinking, like, this is some like rigorous research I can trust. I should probably go buy this magic hot chocolate. Unfortunately, when I dug into the details, I found a study that was, let's just say, less than magical. Let's break down what Beam actually did in their study, like what these terms, what this research design actually looked at. And I want to shout out a website called the Good Clinical Practice Network. And it keeps a registry of US clinical trials. So while you cannot find these details on Beam's website, even the website dedicated to their clinical study, which is wild, you can find it in this registry. Yay for transparency. So the study took place in 2022, and it had two groups of people, or arms, as research would call them. The study was two-armed. One group got Beam's regular dream powder, and the other group got an extra strength version. I hope you're already pausing like me and thinking like, oh, wait a minute, where's the control group? We got one group getting Beam regular, one group getting Beam extra strength. Like, what I thought this was placebo controlled and randomized and double blind, and we're not even testing it against people who didn't get one of their products. Like, that's what? So here's how it worked. For the first 2 weeks, everyone in the study drank a placebo. And if you read the ingredients, it basically just looks like a pretty standard version of hot chocolate. After those 2 weeks, participants were randomly assigned to either start drinking the standard dream powder or the extra strength dream powder for the following 4 weeks. So, this is a type of study where they are using the people in the study, the participants, as their own control. That is a type of study design, like people do that. But I will say in this case, I feel that the way that they've structured this clinical study makes it harder to draw clear comparisons because everyone's getting the placebo. And then, really, what they're comparing between the two groups is regular and extra strength. And I just would have never, ever guessed that if that had not been for this clinical trials registry. I would have assumed because of the randomized, the double blind, the placebo controlled, that they had one group who the whole time was getting the dream powder and another group who the whole time was getting like normal hot chocolate. We're going to talk more about this approach later, but let me continue on. People were surveyed at 4 points during the study. So they were surveyed at a baseline. Baseline is like before anything happens, like right at the start of the study, they took a survey. They took a survey after 2 weeks. So when they finished with the placebo, they took a survey. Then they took another survey at the 4 week mark and a final survey at the 6 week mark. The survey asked questions that they used to measure perceived changes in sleep quality, sleep quantity, sleep habits, and perceptions of sleep, whatever that means. We don't get to see the questions. I don't know how we're supposed to decide if the results are credible if we don't even know what they asked. Like, perceived changes in sleep habits, perceptions of sleep. Those could mean so many different things, but that's the data they were collecting. Baseline, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. The study also used sleep trackers to collect objective data on sleep time and sleep quality. Though, spoiler alert, those results are not in the marketing materials and they're not on the clinical study website. Weird. So in Beam's marketing, they're choosing to highlight this 93% of participants who reported Dream with NanoHemp, that's the secret magic in there, help them to get a more restful night's sleep and wake up feeling more refreshed. On their clinical study website, that is the only stat you'll find. On their blog, where they do a little news article talking about the clinical study, you will see some additional notes, including an intro section that is just really hyping up the study. They say, ready for this? The study turned out better than we had expected. Not only did Dream improve people's sleep, it also affected their overall wellness the day after. And this is the only place in this news release section where then they go into the additional findings from the study. So in terms of sleep quality, they say that there were statistically significant improvements in overall sleep quality and how often people had trouble sleeping. And they also say they found that Dream Powder and Dream Powder Extra Strength significantly improved a range of self-reported scores for sleep quality and health effects related to sleep. So basically they're saying there were statistically significant improvements in their sleep measures, according to their research. They also report that they found statistically significant wellness effects, like people feeling more calm, more psychologically rested, better emotionally. So the details in this pseudo press release on the Beam blog are basically saying hey, statistically significant differences on these markers of sleep quality and wellness. It's interesting to me that these statistics aren't broken down by extra strength and traditional Beam Dream sleep powder, because that seems really important to me. And it's also interesting that they found statistically significant improvements and they're not choosing to share any of that in their marketing materials. Instead, they're really focused on this 93% self-report survey measure. The issue I have with this 93% stat is that Beam doesn't compare this number to placebo results. It doesn't break it down by group, regular Dream versus extra strength Dream. And without this context, it's hard to know this 93%, what does it really mean? And like, who does it actually apply to? Does it reflect meaningful improvements, or is this just like a feel good number that got cherry picked for marketing? Because 93% is a high percentage. The deeper I look, just like the more questions I have. Like, why is only this 93% stat getting shared when they have data on statistically significant differences on a variety of measures? Where are the results on the objective measures of sleep quality and quantity? Because that seems like that could be like hugely important as well. Was the tracker data less impressive? Was the more objective data not impressive, and therefore we just like dropped it? Like, I'm not saying that's what happened. I don't know what happened, but I'm concerned. I would like to know. And then this just all kind of leads into this question, which is like another like massive important piece of context that you need to interpret results, which is like, who the heck was even in this study? According to the clinical trial notes, again, shout out clinical trial registry, all we know is that the people were aged between the ages of 24 and 50, that they had self-reported issues with sleep, but were otherwise like in good health, whatever that means, and that they owned a wearable sleep tracker. So they owned like an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, something like that. That's it. There's no other information about these people, including how many of them there were. Like, was this a study of like 10 people or 100 people? That makes a huge difference in how I feel about these results. But not only that, they don't talk about things like gender, they don't talk about things like work schedules, baseline sleep habits, stress levels, caffeine intake, if people are like shift workers, do they have kids, do they have pets? Like, there's so many things that can impact your sleep quality and quantity, and just like no notes on the people who are in this study or any of these other variables that could like greatly impact the effectiveness of the beam dream. And before you say, like, oh, but Kirsten, they say it was randomized. Like, the whole point of randomizing is that all those outside things don't even matter anymore because you randomized, you took care of it. That doesn't work here because people were their own controls in this study. Randomization doesn't balance out those factors, right? Like, yes, that is the point of randomization, to balance out things that are immeasurable or difficult to control for. That doesn't happen here because people are serving as their own control. The only thing they're randomizing is whether or not you get Beam Dream normal or Beam Dream extra strength. Just to add another layer of confusion, if you're not already confused enough, the footnote on Beam's website, when talking about the clinical trial, says their survey results came from current customers, which then that has me thinking, like, okay, so was the clinical study with current customers who are already like loyal Beam users? Because like that's a major red flag for bias. Like, we don't know. It's like, it's just a confusion abounds. So it's like that's kind of like the who issue. Like, I would want to know so much more about who was in the study in order to properly contextualize these results. There is also, in my opinion, like a what issue, and this comes down to like research design and study protocol, which are like really critical parts of doing research, of doing clinical studies. Randomized control trials are notoriously difficult to plan and implement. When I'm looking at this like limited information on the study protocol, there are some like pretty big questions that I have. In particular, like, what was the protocol? Did people in the study definitely drink the powder every night? Because that is like hugely important. Was that measured? How did they figure that out? Like, how did they enforce drinking the powder every night? Did they take it at the same time every night? Because I think that could also like hugely change these results. We don't know. That part of the protocol isn't shared. That already, like, to me, adds a layer of suspicion around these results. Then we have this thing about like switching from the placebo to the actual dream powder. Like, how did that happen? Did you have like labeled packets? Was there a way to ensure that people took the right one on the right days and followed the instructions? Like, this just seems like, from reading this, I'm like, wouldn't it have been so much easier just to do like a standard randomized control trial and give some people the placebo and some people the real thing? Like, why? How did it end up looking the way it did? And lest I forget, we got to talk about the hot chocolate taste, y'all. Look, I love hot chocolate. I call it my emotional support drink. I love it so much. And I got to point this out because Beam's Dream Powder contains things like hemp and reishi. And in my humble opinion, these are very distinct flavors. And because I was like, maybe you're just weird, Kirsten, I went and looked at the reviews of the dream powders to see if anyone ever mentioned anything about the taste, because I'm like, maybe people like wouldn't notice if you slipped some hemp and mushrooms into their hot chocolate. People do, okay? Because there are, in the actual reviews, you can see that people are mentioning the distinct taste, right? And so why is this important? Well, it's double blind with a placebo. And I'm just wondering, do people really not notice when they're switching from the placebo to the real deal because there is a change in the taste? When you look at the ingredients for placebo, it sounds just like a pretty like typical hot chocolate. And I'm just telling you right now, I'm gonna know the difference between like my Swiss Miss and like Swiss Miss that has been amped up with hemp and reishi. Like 100%. There's no way I'm not gonna notice the difference between those. And I just wonder, is that potentially an issue in the study, especially given that there are reviews mentioning the distinctive flavor? And this is an issue because is it possible that once people realize they've been switched to the real thing, they start to get that placebo effect of like thinking it's working because it's supposed to be working and they want it to be working? So, like, for the first 2 weeks, it's like, who knows, right? Drinking normal hot chocolate, like, okay. And then you start off with week 3 and it's like, oh, this tastes different. I must have the real stuff now. How is that filtering my responses on surveys? How is that changing my responses on surveys or my perception of my sleep and my wellness and what's going on if suddenly I think I am on some sort of supplement that is designed to make me feel better? These gaps, these issues with protocol, these like questions about who is in the study, these make it very hard for me to take this gold standard claim seriously. Here's the thing, this product might genuinely help people sleep better and like feel like rock stars the next day. But when you are marketing your research as the gold standard and you are making bold claims like 93% successful, you have to back that up with transparency. Beam's website says we took every possible measure to ensure unbiased and accurate results. And just like reading through their protocol, what's publicly available, I call BS. There's absolutely no way you did, because how is this study designed like this? And why aren't you giving us the full details? Without these critical details, like who actually participated in the study, how many people actually participate in the study, what did you do to ensure compliance, what did the objective data show? Like, it is impossible to trust a statement like that. And I just want to be clear, like, this isn't just about Beam. Like, there are many wellness products that are in this same position of using scientific language to sound credible without fully delivering on those promises. So does Beam's magic hot chocolate actually help you sleep? Maybe, but their study raises more questions than it answers. And this 93% stat, I'm calling it more of a marketing tool, less of a definitive result coming from legit research. This is why digging into research matters. Just because something looks official, just because something's randomized, double blind, placebo controlled, does not mean that that's like the whole story. Transparency and accessibility are so key to building trust. And when companies fall short of giving you the full details, we should be asking why. Consumers should not have to dig through the depths of the internet and find registries or reach out to companies via email to get the full details of a study. That's ridiculous, and honestly, it's shady. If you are marketing a product as scientifically proven, the evidence should be front and center, and it should absolutely not be hidden behind vague claims and like sexy science terms. This has been Is This Legit? With me, Dr. Kirsten Lee Hill. Remember, question everything, especially the science that makes it to your screens.